Hello, everyone. This is Jim Lucy, Editor-in-Chief for Electrical Wholesaling and Electrical Marketing, with episode number 126 of the Today's Electrical Economy podcast series sponsored by Champion Fiberglass. Champion began producing epoxy fiberglass conduit and fittings in 1988, and in 1989 developed the first conduit from epoxy resins that had flame resistance and low smoke characteristics. This met the most stringent codes and specifications. Today's podcast looks at some of the very largest mega projects now in the construction pipeline, and we'll also take a look at the craziness in the copper market and some comments that I saw from some executives in the field that may be of interest. We'll also be checking out some weekly economic indicators that can give you a sense of where the U.S. economy and the electrical market may be headed. These 5 weekly indicators are initial employment claims at the state level, rail freight car traffic, the Baker Hughes rig count, oil prices, and copper prices. Our thanks again to Champion Fiberglass for sponsoring the Today's Electrical Economy series for 2025 and for sponsoring it for over 100 episodes over the past 5 years. For the week ending August 2nd, the advanced figure for seasonally adjusted initial unemployment claims was 226,000. That's an increase of 7,000 from the previous week's revised level. The 4-week moving average was 220,750, a decrease of 500 from the previous week's revised average. The U.S. unemployment rate is steady, and for July it was 4.2%, and that rate has remained in a narrow range of 4% to 4.2% since May of last year. We didn't see any really truly significant claims on the state level for unemployment claims, and no state registered through August the 2nd with a drop of more than 1,000. The states that did have the larger claims drops were New York, down 904 claims, still sitting at 13,017. California's unemployment claims for the week ending August the 2nd, down 590, and they're at 39,998. Georgia down 500, also down 590, sitting at 4,241. Louisiana down 493, only 1,421 initial claims filed. And Kansas, initial claims filed for August the 2nd, 1,171. That is down 423. It was also pretty mild as far as claims, with the biggest increases for the week ending August the 2nd. We had one state was over 1,000 claims, and that is Massachusetts, up 1,155 to 5,306. Texas was up 900 claims to 16,818. Oregon up 881 claims to 4,957. Connecticut up 607 claims to 3,456. And New Jersey up 593 claims to 9,607. One of the more interesting leading indicators for the overall U.S. economy is freight rail traffic. It's a measure of the amount of raw materials and finished goods being shipped by rail. The best source for this data? It's the American Association of Railroads, or AAR. It publishes this data weekly at www.aar.org. Freight rail traffic continues to be one of the more bullish leading economic indicators. It's up again this week, and it's up a nice bump from this time last year. Total U.S. weekly rail traffic for the week ending August the 2nd was 513,529 carloads and intermodal units. That's up 2.9% compared with the same week last year. Total combined U.S. traffic for the first 31 weeks of 2025 was 15,162,611 carloads and intermodal units. That is an increase of 3.8% compared to this time last year. Freight traffic is at its healthiest rate when it tops 500,000, which it did in this most recent data, and it's been at that level every week since the week ending July the 19th. Most of the key freight categories showed steady increase in rail traffic over this time this last year. Intermodal units, one of the largest and most important categories, was up 4.7%. Grain was up 6.9%, and coal was up 6.1%. The only category of the majors that was down was metallic ores and metals, down 1.9%. That I should say we're down at least 1%. So all in all, you can see where this strong traffic on the individual category level supports that overall figure, with total traffic up 3.8% compared to this time last year. If you track the oil market, you're probably familiar with the Baker Hughes rig count, which tracks the oil and gas rigs that are operating. This data is available by state, by basin, and nationally at www.rigcount.bakerhughes.com. Oil production in the United States, oil and gas production, not as bullish an indicator as what we're just talking about with rail freight car traffic, but it's not horrendously bad. It just has not been up as much as people would think, or want, I should say. This slide gives you an idea of the largest oil and gas deposits. It gives you a good sense of just how many of these large oil players are in Texas and Oklahoma and parts of New Mexico, and how big an area the Marcellus gas region covers in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and parts of West Virginia. Momentum in the Baker Hughes rig count continued on its same pace it's been for really most of the year. It lost 2 rigs over the past week, and that is through early August. Total operational rigs were down to 540, and most recent data is down 46 rigs year over year for a 7.8% decline. The Texas rig count was down 4 rigs through the last week and is off 10.6% year over year. As we always mention, Texas by far the largest of all the individual state oil markets. New Mexico's rig count for the week was up 3 rigs, but is still tracking for an 11.1% decline. When you look at the West Texas Intermediate Crude Oil price, or WTI, it's at $66.28 per barrel on Monday, August the 11th. That's about $3 lower per barrel than the year-over-year average of $69.70. The price is currently sitting near the low of the past 30 days of data, which briefly topped $7 per barrel at the end of July, but it seems to have settled down right around that current price of around $66 per barrel. Economists like to call copper pricing Dr. Copper because it's the leading economic indicator for future activity, since copper is used in so many industries. The construction industry is among the leading markets because of its use in wire cable and copper plumbing pipe. And I have to say, of all the economic indicators that I track for this presentation, copper's been about the wildest, particularly in the last month to 6 weeks after the announcement of the 50% tariffs and the scaling back to some parts of the economy for copper production and copper imports that maybe help out a little bit for the electrical market. Tracking and forecasting copper pricing has never been for the faint of heart, but the tariff-induced uncertainty over the past few weeks is something to behold. I can definitely see now why John Mothersole, who for many, many years would speak at the Dodge construction market on copper pricing, used to call copper pricing the bane of his existence, because even 10, 15 years ago it was kind of a wiggy indicator to follow. But now, for the past 6 weeks, I'd love to hear what he has to say about it now. Because from the initial announcement about the 50% tariffs on key imported copper goods to the surprising exemption at the end of July of copper cathodes and some other finished materials, copper prices on the COMEX exchange have swung at least $1.33 per pound. And currently, on August 11th, at $4.45 per pound on the COMEX, are well below the year-over-year average of $4.68 per pound. So it's a very difficult commodity to track right now. It's hard to say just exactly what are ahead. In the next slide, I'll give you a few comments from people that are active in the electrical market and have a vested interest in the copper market and to track it for metals industries. If you've been listening to these podcasts for a while, you know when I'm looking for input on the copper market, I also refer to John Gross, the publisher of the Copper Journal. John has been tracking the metals markets, and specifically the copper market, for decades, really, and he's always got an interesting take on what's been happening in the market. Here's, in part, and you can look at the Copper Journal is a great read if you're looking for any additional insight on the market. Here's what he had to say in his most recent summary. On July the 8th, spot copper on the COMEX blasts off 66 cents into the stratosphere, powered by the announcement of a 50% tariff to be imposed on the red metal. But on July the 30th, copper collapses $1.12 into the mesoscleropic, or twilight zone, of the deep ocean, where imports of refined copper or cathodes are unexpectedly exempt. Where we go from here is anyone's guess, because the global copper market has bounced from one extreme to another due to tariff issues rather than from any other fundamental influences. And if John Gross is not sure where copper prices are going, I cannot tell you anything on my end to it. It's just a crazy market to be following. I also found it interesting on the NEMA's statement on copper markets, on the tariffs. NEMA's Deborah Phillips, the president and CEO of NEMA, struck kind of a tone, I couldn't say conciliatory tone, where she complimented the Trump administration on the tariffs, but also wanted to highlight the fact and the impact that they could have on NEMA members in the market. She said, to assure that the U.S. does not lose ground on copper-reliant goals of winning the AI race, boosting grid reliability, onshoring manufacturing, and capitalizing on our energy assets, NEMA urges the administration to pair its tariffs with the offsets or incentives for companies investing in U.S. manufacturing, making copper products in the America, and contributing to our power infrastructure. There was also a comment that actually, the first time I saw it was in one of our sister publications here at Endeavor Business Media, contractor.com. Found a quote from the Copper Development Association president and CEO, Adam Estelle. He said when the announcement of the copper tariffs came out, the revision of them, I should say. CDA thanks President Trump for his concerted efforts to ensure a stronger, more resilient, and more reliable domestic copper industry. Upon initial review, we believe the administration has taken decisive, comprehensive, and calibrated action designed to supercharge domestic production. The forthcoming details will be important to understand full impacts, but the initial framework appears to be highly aligned with the solutions recommended by CDA's fabricator members. These actions support CDA's position that copper is critical to national security, energy dominance, AI supremacy, reshoring manufacturing, and restoring America's standing as an industrial superpower. Now is the time to unleash American copper like never before. One of my favorite parts of my job is updating electrical marketing's data on large construction projects. And I have some new data to share. Outside of data center projects, the non-residential construction market is fairly soft when measured by the Census Department's data for new construction spending, and I didn't find as many projects topping the $100 million mark as in the past. However, I did find plenty of projects underway or in the planning stage to share. One of the projects of interest is actually one of the largest ones underway right now in New York. In New York City and Manhattan, a $10 billion renovation of the Port Authority bus terminal. I commuted in and out of New York for about, 10 or 12 years, and much of it through the Port Authority terminal. And it was something to behold, stepping over people that were sleeping in the off-track betting parlor on the way to or from my bus lane up in the top, one of the top arcades up there. It was quite something to see, and I'm glad to see they're doing something with that, because there are literally thousands of people travel through that there. But it looks like a very big, very interesting project that will have a lot of impact on the market there. As I mentioned, I update these projects for electrical marketing. We have a database there. And this year alone, I did find, although it's been not at the same pace as years past, have over 190 projects in the pipeline. That means they're either underway in the design phase or in the proposal stage that have come up. And electrical marketing subscribers get a downloadable spreadsheet with all the projects with some additional information on them as part of a $99 annual subscription. As I mentioned, there was 190 projects worth $100 million in total contract value that hit the market so far in 2025 that I was able to find. Awful lot on the, when I look at them too, and as you've been tracking data centers, so many things in the proposal stage, and you hope that they do eventually become fruition. But I'm starting to really look at these more closely, because there's a lot of stuff that's said to be ongoing that will break ground, and many of them may not happen. Although we do, there's certainly been enough in the pipeline of data centers that have broken ground to keep things very, very interesting. Let's look at some of the largest projects now. All right, as I mentioned, we're going to look at the projects first. Over $1 billion in total contract value. Just to kind of give you a sense of how that plays in the electrical market, the total construction product value, rule of thumb, electrical work generally accounts for 10% of that. And that's just an estimate, of course. Different projects will have a different electrical amount of content. I have seen estimates for data centers, for instance, that are about 25% of the total contract value is specific to electrical products. So these big ones obviously can represent a very large market opportunity. The biggest one that in the planning stage right now, $20 billion, the Micron Technology White Plains Commerce Center in Clay, New York. That's upstate New York, in the planning stage. Another $20 project, and this is Intel in Ohio, mixed use project. It's in the planning stage. Intel Corp, the Johnson Gateway Plan District. Another one, again, this is outside of the data center. So it's interesting to see as many projects that we mentioned. Our data centers typically are some of the very largest, but we've got some pretty sizable ones that are in here that are specific to the data center market. And this is in St. James, Louisiana, industrial project, again, planning stage for Formosa Plastic Sunshine project. That's $12 billion. In New York, the Hudson Yards mixed use project. And if you've been to the Javits Center in recent years, you can see the amount of construction that's gone on there. That's $12 billion mixed use project in the design phase right now in July. I mentioned the Midtown Bus Terminal, $10 billion. In Phoenix, one of the large semiconductor projects. This is Fab 3 Phase 3 in this Phoenix Metro semiconductor project. Did break ground June 2025, $10 billion. In Indiana, a lot of construction in Indiana, both for some of the data center work for sure, some large industrial projects, also some projects in conjunction with Purdue and Indiana universities. But here's a big one for Eli Lilly, $2.25 billion at Eli Lilly Medicine Foundry. Large data center, this one in Cedar Rapids, broke ground June 25, and this is phase one of the SNA data center. An office tower, a large office tower project, not quite as many of them around. Start plans were announced in July 2025. This is on Madison Ave, I believe, right near and would be towering over the Grand Central Station on Park Avenue, just near Park Avenue there. Still in the planning stages, I believe, although I'm having a hard time getting exactly the status of this one, but it'll be a nice big airport project in Cleveland Hopkins International Airport, $1.6 billion. Underway, a large, this is in the mass transit, which has been a fairly active area over the past years. It's public, obviously public transportation. New York has seen a lot of work too, but there's also some, whether it's light rail or freight rail types of things, seen a bit of activity here. This one is the Amtrak East Tunnel Rehabilitation. It broke ground 2020 June of this year, 1.6 billion. In Sacramento, a number of large airport projects broke ground, 1.3 billion. I-35 tunnel and pump station, Austin, Texas, broke ground in June. That's at 1.1 billion. In Charleston, the beautiful city of Charleston, South Carolina, broke ground in 2025. An airport extension there. I believe they also have a big, large parking garage going on there. And also in the pharmaceutical field, this in Wilmington, Delaware, we're 470,000 square foot biologics center, broke ground May 2025. In that previous slide, I gave you an idea of some of the or mix of the different types of projects that are broke ground. This slide here, I'm looking at more specifically to data center projects, and there was so much talk over with the initiative in Pennsylvania on the date that was sponsored by some of the local politicians there and supported by President Trump. The amount of money going to be invested in Pennsylvania, proposed to be invested, some huge, tens of billion dollars. But there's big projects being proposed elsewhere too. And again, and this is in Eloy, Arizona. And that I believe is between Phoenix and Tucson. $33 billion Vermland proposal for the La Osa data center project. There's a big developer there is proposing that. Also a gigantic one too in Mooresville, North Carolina. Track's proposal, Mooreville Technology Park, big data center campus there. New Albany, Ohio, been a lot of activity in Ohio, data centers, planning stages, $28 billion. This is part of the large government promoted initiative that we talked about. And these are a number of projects, and there are plans announced, $20 billion by Amazon alone, AI infrastructure throughout the state of Pennsylvania. Going down to Texas, breaking ground July 2025, $18.7 billion. And the size of these projects have just gotten bigger and bigger since we started tracking them for electrical marketing. I mean, heck, you'd get a $1 billion project, and that was kind of the average, but these are many times it's a campus. It's not just one data center type of building. Again, for example, here in Louisa County, Virginia, that plans announced July 25, $17 billion, 3.9 million square foot data center campus in Virginia. In Alabama, Bessemer, Project Marvel Data Center, $14.4 billion, another gigantic one. Giant also in Clayco Compute Data Center renovation, Chicago, Illinois, planning stage July 25, with $12.7 billion. In Kansas City, Kansas, not too far from where I live and work. Design phase right now, the Red Wolf Data Center, $12 billion project. We've got a number of data centers here. You don't normally think of Kansas City as a big data center area, but wow, we've got up north of the airport, very large project going on there as well. Amazon also announced a big project in a campus in Hamlet, North Carolina, in the design phase in July, $10 billion. In Illinois, Hoffman Estates, not too far outside in Chicago downtown, $10 billion. Another Google announced a big project in Kansas City, another $10 billion data center in Kansas City alone. I mentioned it before, $12 billion, now $10 billion. Port of Kansas City, Google project Mica Data Center Campus, funding approved in June. Going out to Nevada and Reno, apparently there's quite a bit of information on some data centers going on in Reno. Vantage Data Center Campus, apparently quite large there, is underway in August, $3 billion. Look at Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and a lot of data center work, throughout Iowa. But on the eastern part of the state, I don't recall seeing quite as many projects. A lot in Des Moines, quite a bit on the western part of the state, bordering the Missouri River, and not too far from Omaha. But we've got a big phase one of the SNA Data Center project, $2 billion. In downtown Kansas City, this is interesting to me, $1 billion project, the old Kansas City Star printing plant. It was architecturally a very beautiful plant. You could all glassed out. You could always see in what's going on there. Unfortunately, with things going on with print newspapers, they were not able to maintain that there. So They moved the printing out of there, but they're talking about a data center. The plan's announced June 25 in that particular downtown building. Don't often see data centers right downtown, but it's an interesting use of that building. Breaking ground, and this is right in the sweet spot of all the data center activity west of downtown Washington, the Saby at Ashburn Building A data center. That's broke ground July 25, $650 million. You get a little bit smaller, but I did want to include them. Middletown, Virginia, Meadowbrook Technology Park Data Center Campus, $500 million. Project Blue Data Center, Phase 3 in Tucson, entered planning stage in June. And in Laredo, Texas, $300 million. And that has also entered planning stages in June 2025. And that was from the source of that data was the Dodge Construction Network. And just to kind of wrap things up on our major project areas where there's some new activity, airports definitely stuck out to me. We mentioned a couple of these projects earlier on, but gosh, if any of us have done traveling over the past couple of years, it seems like every airport in the country seems to be under construction to some degree or another, and it is continuing for sure. These are, but the projects that I have listed here are just projects that I've seem to be hitting the news over the past month to maybe 6 weeks, as when I was researching the article here. And there's some good sized projects. I mean, this they mentioned before the Cleveland Airport, it's at $1.6 billion planning stages. Sacramento, $1.3 billion, broke ground in August, and that's a good size. Charleston's got $1 billion project there in addition to a parking garage, I believe. Memphis International Airport underway, $700 million. And in Miami, Concourse K at the Miami International Airport, broke ground 2025 in June, $600 million. This ends our podcast for today. I do want to thank the folks from Champion Fiberglass for sponsoring today's episode, for sponsoring the podcast series for all of 2025, and as well as for the past 5 years for more than 100 episodes. We do thank you for the support. You can contact me directly if you have any questions about any of the information here. I did mention electrical marketing if you wanted to subscribe to get access to some of the project data that we provide here. You can get me at jlucy@endeavorb2b.com or by phone 913-461-7679. We'll be back at you with our next podcast on Monday, August the 25th in just 2 weeks. So until then, be happy, stay healthy. Look forward to talking with you in 2 weeks. Take care.